first, I want to thank you
Yes,
all for inviting me to this meaningful event. So today I am going to present to you about Marine Spatial Planning MSP of Korea. So thank you for having interest in this MSP system of Korea. And this is my table of contents today. First, we have had the evolution of the coastal and marine spatial management system. So I will look into how those systems have evolved, how the coastal spatial management system has evolved to the bigger, broader scheme of marine spatial management, and then look at the actual implementation of this MSP and ocean zoning. And lastly, I will talk about various issues that we had faced while implementing this system and what is the future direction that we want to pursue. So first, I will talk about this coastal spatial management system and the marine spatial management system. So we now have this concept that we should not just look at the narrow coastal area, but look at the broader area of the entire marine. So that was caused by the environmental pollution, conflicts of interest, and due to other social and economic reasons. So this kind of concept of separating the space for management, it was first applied to the inland and then expanded to the coastal area and then again expanded to the broader marine space. So during this time, we had applied various concepts for the spatial management. And while doing so, we identified various issues of those separate concepts. So that's how we got to have this integrated marine management system by resolving various issues that we had in the past. So I have prepared this map to show you what kind of issues we had with the spatial management. So this is near Incheon of Seoul, how we manage the area here. So you can see that there is the beach, which is opened up for the public tourists. And we also have aqua farm and river and port. So there are areas that needs to be managed for the fishermen to use the port. So you can see here that there are various methods to be applied for the management of those spaces. And when that happens, there were conflicts of different management methods applied to those areas, and we had issues arising from that. The reason why we need a coastal spatial management is because there are more diverse usage of marine spaces, and we are having more dense activities of those marine activities happening as time passes. So you can see that here we have come up with the integrated marine management concept to consolidate various existing methods. So here you can see that we are creating the marine spatial plan and separate the coastal area based on that plan. So that's like the most basic concept of separating the space. So as for the marine spatial planning first, we do the planning based on the territorial sea, and that is done by the provincial government. And during the zoning process, the marine space get different purposes for the usage of that marine space. And during that process, the government looks at the policy priorities and then grant the purpose of the use of that specific space. So that is why we have called it as the data-based zoning scheme. And if you look at different functions of those marine spaces, they are very complicated. So for policymakers to understand in one glimpse what's the purpose of that space, it was quite difficult. So that is why we have made a revision to the existing system to have this integrated marine management system. So here, after the revision, you can see that it is applied to the bigger area that includes the territorial waters and the EEZ. So that is the first change. And in the past, only the local governments were setting up the plan, but now we have the central government and the local government cooperating together, especially for the EEZ. The central government is involved in the planning process. Also, this concept of zoning is developed so that the objective or the usage of that marine space could be assigned by using various marine data. So qualitative and quantitative data is aggregated for this zoning. And after the plan is created, the implementation actions are also created. And as you can see here, we have 9 different categories of marine spaces set up in different colors. And just by looking at the color, you can see what's the usage of that specific space. So it's very intuitive. The color of that space would be indicating what the purpose or the usage of that specific space would be. In order to adopt this MSP in Korea, we started the basic research since 2015. So the Ministry of Ocean and Fisheries and KMI, we created a TF team to do the research. And during that time, we did a pilot project that was targeting the Gyeonggi area. And during that time, through that pilot project, we came up with a great result and had this project adopted as a national policy agenda. So through those processes in 2019, the Marine Spatial Planning and Management Act was adopted, and through this act, we could have the basis and the driver to move the related actions forward. To briefly introduce to you about this act, it has the planning part and the enforcement part. For the planning part of this act, for the entire marine space of Korea, it has the long-term policy direction. So that is named as the MSP Framework Plan. And there is another part of this planning part, which is called the MSP Management Plan, and that is for the management of the region, including the zoning scheme. So those two are in the planning part of this act. And after the planning is completed, we do the consultation with the local community and related parties to enforce the act. So we have another part of this act that is titled the enforcement. So biggest characteristics or benefits of this MSP is that it is based on facts and data. So we can get very objective outcome and very objective classification of the space. So it is evidence-based. So the entire policy making and the MSP is all done based on evidence and data. So as I said already, this is part of the ocean, integrated ocean and marine management system. And for the MSP, it is created by the provincial government, and EEZs are created by the central government. In Korea, we have 11 provincial governments. So as of 2021, the whole area, including the 11 provincial waters and 3 EEZs, were created. So out of all these, you can see that the areas are classified into 3 sections here, the west, south, and east. So in order to have the evidence-based decision making, it is very important to have the proper concept or operation method for marine spatial management. So here you can see that we have adopted this concept of marine use zones. So these zones are classified based on the purpose of the zone. First, for fisheries. Second, marine and extraction. Third, energy development, marine tourism, environmental and ecosystem management, research and education, harbor and navigation, military activity, and lastly, the safety management. So these marine use zones, you can see that by just looking at the name of the zone, you can understand what is the core activity occurring in that zone. So in principle, this marine use zone cannot be overlapping. So one place cannot have the overlapping zones. However, in case of the research and education, military activity, and safety management, those 3 activities can occur in parallel with other activities. So for those 3 activities, they can overlap with the others. So I said that this marine use zone should be decided based on evidence, and I'll tell you actual cases of deciding the marine use zone, and I will explain about the actual cases now. So in creating the MSP, first we do the zoning and then decide a marine use zone, and then decide the policy direction and the management direction for the marine use zone to create the management plan. So while creating that management plan, first thing to be done is to understand the policy initiatives or policy priorities of that region. So the reason why this is done first is because we don't want to have any conflicts of priorities or overlap of activities. So if that happens, then we want to know which activity or which purpose should come first. So that's why we do this kind of prioritization activity first. And we have this scientific assessment called marine spatial assessment to understand the actual priority of that region. So for the marine spatial assessment, there are different kinds of data, and the first thing we need to do is to identify what are the data that we can acquire.
And we have to identify what is the data set that can represent the characteristics of such space in a question. What you're seeing here on this slide is whenever we conduct marine spatial assessment, this is a list of data that we use for such assessment. So you can see that there are different categories like fishing, mineral resource development, and energy development, and so on. And there are assessment items accordingly. And whenever we need assessment, we have to process the data for our analysis and assessment. So please, this is for your reference in order to see what is being looked at when we conduct the MSA, Marine Spatial Assessment. And then we implement the Marine Spatial Assessment. You see here is the grids where the data is allocated. We feed the input data and we do the assessment, and all the results are displayed on these grids. This is a specific process flow when we conduct our assessment. This is also for your reference. Let me share the real life example with you. First, how we decide what shall be the fisheries protection zone. First, we look at the fish farm and we collect the data related to fish farm and the volume of the fish catch, and also we pass fishing density analysis, which is about fishing vessel location. All the data is fed into the system so that we can conduct the assessment, and the results are shown on this grid. If you look at the right bottom, you can see that there are different grades. Depending on the assessment outcomes, we give the grade from 1 to 3. And those with the grade higher than 3 will be allocated to the fisheries protection zone. This is how we make a decision. The next one is how we do the mapping of the environment and ecosystem management zone. What we look at is a list of assessment items as you see on this slide. And also we look at the previously designated fisheries protection zone, and based on such zoning, we continue to do the mapping of the environment and ecosystem management zone. This is what we did with the mapping of safety management zone. We look at the marine leisure prohibited area or industrial and basic facilities such as marine energy facility as assessment items for us to consider when we make a decision on safety management zone. And as I said to you at the outset, there could be some overlapped area because this is the mapping of safety management zone. But in principle, the zones shall not be overlapped except those three exceptions. Whenever there is a conflict, if you look at the left top image, the blue colored area is where the fishing activities take place a lot. And if you look at the shaded green part is the protected marine area, protected waters. In this case, you can see that there is a conflict. Whenever there is overlapped area, we need to make a decision what shall take the priority. And in order to decide on the priority, we have to consider the policy objective, policy directive, and the individual nature of each activity. And based on such a consideration, you can see that at the left bottom image, we have this calibrated image of zoning as a draft. But this designated area is where diverse activities take place in the same space. So only with the marine use zoning decision, we cannot fulfill what the objective. So we need to look at such areas where a lot of activities take place in one specific confined space. So we also make considerations, for example, by giving management code. If you look at the management code on the right side, we can see that the space is where fishing activities take place a lot, and we can also see from the management code that this is the second priority is environment and ecosystem, and also priority is all displayed for users to see what takes the first priority, the second, and the third. What you see on this slide is the announcement made by the authority as of the 30th September. You can see that the all decisions were made for different marine use zones. And when such a draft is developed, we have to go through review and consultation process. And also we have to invite the public to share their opinion so that we can make adjustment to the draft plan. And then we have to get the approval before we make this out as a public notice. Once a plan is developed, we have to validate the feasibility of the plan. So under our Korea's marine spatial planning scheme, we have a marine spatial suitability review approach. So once MSP is developed, we can establish development plans accordingly. However, when such development plans are established, the characteristic and the features of the marine spatial planning need to be considered. And with this marine spatial suitability review, we review the possibility where to go ahead with the development plans or not. Now, I'd like to talk to you about the challenges and recommendations for moving forward. The first challenge that we are faced with is the EEZs. There is not enough information regarding the EEZs. Especially, we have an abundant amount of information regarding coastal waters. However, there is lack of information regarding the EEZs. When there is a lack of information, how can we decide on the marine use zones? That is the first challenge that we are faced with. And what we are utilizing is the big data and also the access to satellite so that we can collect more data regarding the exclusive economic zones. This is something that we need to improve upon from now on. And the next thing we need to focus on is that we have to involve different stakeholders. For example, the provincial government is involved in coming up with a plan. However, various data needs to be collected and shared from the very beginning. So it is very difficult for local authorities or local stakeholders to do this alone. Therefore, from the first phase, the central government and the provincial government and the local government come together to develop a plan. However, after the development of the initial plan, local government has to take the job of revising or updating the initially developed plan. That's why we need to help them to enhance their capacity to do so. So this is something that we need to work on as well from now on. Now the next issue is the maritime boundary issue. In Korea, among provincial governments, there are some cases where maritime boundary is not clearly defined. With only clearly defined maritime boundary, each provincial government can come up with their own marine spatial planning. In order to overcome this boundary issue, two provincial governments can jointly develop MSP through a system. We call it as a joint MSP. However, the approach to developing this joint MSP, future direction, and next steps are not clearly specified in institutions. So this is something that we need to improve upon as well. We need to improve as well. The next one is how we are going to strengthen ecosystem-based approach to MSP. At the moment, the current MSP scheme or framework, we provide information to check the current status of the MSP. However, ecosystem service is not fully reflected in MSP. Of course, at our institute, the Korea Maritime Institute, we have projects and tasks related to how to reflect the ecosystem service into MSP. But we need to have a institutional basis so that we can systematically reflect ecosystem services when we develop MSP. And one more thing that I'd like to tell you is that once we have our initial MSP in place, we need to think about how we are going to coordinate this MSP with our neighboring countries, and thus we need to facilitate cooperation on MSP throughout Asia. Of course, in order to do that, international cooperation is critical. However, we are all faced with the coronavirus pandemic, and we cannot meet each other in person. Still, we strive to continuously facilitate international cooperation. However, such international cooperation projects is faced with challenges because of the pandemic. However, we will come up with the means and measures to promote international cooperation despite the current situation. I hear that there are many participants from Bangladesh, and I look forward to working with you and meeting you in person so that we can have in-depth discussions regarding this topic. I hope to see you soon again in person. And this will be the end of the presentation that I have prepared for today. Thank you so much for your attention.